I sat by the window last night holding a coffee cup that had already gone cold. The street outside was quiet, the kind of silence small towns in America fall into after dinner. Families were asleep, porch lights glowing, and the sound of a distant train carried through the night. To anyone passing by, my life might have looked peaceful. But inside me it was chaos. My name is Sarah. I'm 29 years old and I live in a modest little town just outside Cleveland, Ohio. People here know me as the lucky one. They see the house with the white fence, the husband who waves politely when he mows the lawn, and the smiling photos I sometimes force myself to post online. From the outside I look like a woman who has it all. But the truth is, I feel like a stranger in my own life. I used to think that if I followed the steps, marriage, stability, a good home, happiness would naturally come. That's what everyone told me growing up. But sitting in that chair by the window staring at my reflection in the glass, I realized something terrifying. I had been lying to myself for years. Every morning I wake up next to a man who is kind and steady. He does nothing wrong, yet my heart feels empty beside him. I go through the motions. Breakfast together, little kisses on the cheek, dinners where we talk about bills and plans. But inside I feel nothing. It's like I am watching my own life play out from the outside, trapped in a role I never chose. And the cruelest part? Nobody knows. My friends think I'm living the dream. My parents call me lucky. Even my husband, who notices my quietness, believes I'm just tired or stressed. I've become an expert at smiling when I want to cry. Last night, though, something broke inside me. I thought about leaving. I even pictured myself packing a suitcase, driving away in the dark and starting over somewhere new where no one knows my name. My hand trembled as I touched the handle of the old suitcase in my closet. But then, he asked me something that shattered me in a way I wasn't ready for. Last night I almost left. But then he asked something that shattered everything. The morning after that restless night, I woke up to the sound of clinking dishes in the kitchen. My husband, Daniel, was already making breakfast. That's the thing about him. He is steady, reliable, the kind of man most women pray for. He makes the coffee just the way I like it, with a splash of almond milk and 1 sugar, and places it quietly on my nightstand before I even get out of bed. To anyone else, that small act would be the picture of love. To me it felt like a chain. I dragged myself out of bed, forcing a smile as I walked into the kitchen. The smell of scrambled eggs filled the air. He looked up, his face lighting up in that familiar, gentle way. "Morning, Sarah," he said, sliding a plate toward me. "Morning," I replied, my voice softer than it should have been. We sat across from each other, talking about little things, bills that needed paying, a neighbor's new car, his plans for work. I nodded at all the right moments, but inside I was somewhere else entirely. My mind floated away, almost like my body was there but my soul was standing outside, knocking to be let out. After breakfast I went about my routine. Cleaning the counters, folding laundry, answering emails for my part-time job. The house looked perfect, like something out of a magazine. White curtains, polished floors, the faint scent of lavender from a candle I kept burning almost every day. But I couldn't shake the thought that this wasn't a home, it was a stage. I was the actress playing the part of the happy wife, and nobody knew I was suffocating behind the script. The neighbors often stopped by to say hello. Mrs. Cooper from across the street loved to tell me how lucky I was. "That Daniel of yours, he's a good man. Always smiling, always helping with the yard. You've got the perfect marriage, dear." I smiled, thanked her, and closed the door before my tears could betray me. Because she was right. Daniel was a good man. Too good. And that was the problem. He deserved someone who loved him the way he loved me. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't force my heart to feel what it didn't. At night, when we sat down for dinner, he'd reach across the table and hold my hand. His hands were warm, strong, safe. But every time I felt a pang of guilt so sharp it nearly broke me. I squeezed his hand back, but my eyes always darted away. And then there were the gestures. The flowers he brought home just because. The surprise kisses on my forehead when I was reading. The way he'd tuck a blanket around me when I fell asleep on the couch. These should have been the moments that filled me with joy, but instead they were reminders. Reminders of the lie I was living, reminders of the love I couldn't return. Around the 3rd minute of that evening, the moment that changed everything arrived. It was a Friday night. Daniel had cooked dinner, pasta with a creamy sauce he knew I loved. He poured me a glass of wine, sat across from me, and smiled with that same hopeful sparkle in his eyes. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady but full of anticipation, "I've been thinking, maybe it's time we started a family." The fork slipped from my hand, clattering onto the plate. My chest tightened. Baby. He wanted a baby. He wanted to build a future, deepen our life together, tie us forever in a way I wasn't sure I could handle. I forced a smile, nodding as my heart raced. That's a big step," I whispered. He laughed lightly. "I know, but I think we're ready. Don't you?" I excused myself to the kitchen under the pretense of needing water, but really I just needed air. My hands gripped the counter as I tried to breathe. Ready? I wasn't ready for this life at all, let alone to bring a child into it. And that's when it happened. As I walked back to the table, I noticed his jacket draped carelessly over the chair. A small slip of paper peeked out of the pocket. My hand moved before my brain could stop it. I reached in, pulling it free. It was a receipt. A receipt for something I didn't recognize. My eyes scanned the words, my hands beginning to tremble. He poured me wine and smiled. Then I found something in his jacket that made my hands shake. The receipt in Daniel's jacket was for a jewelry store. My breath caught as I read the words, "Engraved necklace, for my love." For a split second my chest ached. Was it for me? Or for someone else? I folded it quickly and shoved it back into the pocket before he could notice. He was still smiling at the table, sipping wine like nothing was wrong. My hands trembled as I sat back down, pretending to listen to him talk about weekend plans. But my mind wasn't in that room anymore. It was somewhere far away. Somewhere I had buried deep, hoping it would never resurface. Because that piece of paper wasn't just a receipt. It was a trigger. It reminded me of another necklace from another man. It was 4 years ago in Chicago. I was 25, fresh out of college, full of dreams that I thought would last forever. And then there was Ethan. He was everything Daniel wasn't. Unpredictable, passionate, alive. With him every day felt like fire. We'd walk along the city streets late at night, laughing too loud, eating cheap pizza on sidewalks, dreaming about a future that felt so certain at the time. On my 25th birthday he gave me a silver necklace. Nothing expensive, but he had it engraved with the words, "Always us." I remember the way he fastened it around my neck, his fingers brushing my skin, his lips pressing softly against my shoulder. I believed him then. I believed we would be forever. But forever didn't last. One cold evening I walked into his apartment and found a note on the counter. No explanation, no long goodbye. Just 5 words, "I can't do this anymore." He was gone. No calls. No texts. Nothing. Just silence. I wore that necklace for weeks afterward, clutching it like a lifeline, waiting for him to come back. But he never did. Eventually I stuffed it into a box, buried it in my closet, and told myself I had to move on. And that's when Daniel appeared in my life. He was steady, safe, everything Ethan wasn't. He didn't promise wild adventures or forever burning flames. He said he offered calm, security, a love that felt more like shelter than passion. I convinced myself that was enough. That maybe what I needed wasn't fire, but a roof over my head and someone who would never leave. So when Daniel asked me to marry him, I said yes. Not because I was healed, but because I was desperate to forget. Back at the dinner table that night, Daniel's voice blurred in my ears. My fingers touched my collarbone, right where Ethan's necklace used to rest. My chest burned with the memory. I thought I had buried him. But the truth is I never let him go. Later that night, while Daniel slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The sound of the clock ticking on the nightstand felt like it was counting down to something I didn't want to face. And then, as if the universe wanted to rip me open completely, my phone buzzed on the dresser. I reached for it, half asleep, expecting an email or a spam message. But when I saw the name on the screen, my whole body froze. Ethan. I hadn't seen that name in 4 years. My breath caught in my throat, my hands trembling so hard I almost dropped the phone. The message was simple. Just 3 words. "Are you okay?" Tears spilled instantly down my face. 4 years of silence. 4 years of pretending I had forgotten. And with 3 little words, the ghost I tried to bury was standing in front of me again. I didn't reply. Not right away. I locked the phone, shoved it under the pillow and closed my eyes tight as if squeezing them shut would erase what I had just seen. But I couldn't sleep. My chest ached, my heart pounded, and suddenly Daniel's steady breathing beside me felt like a weight pressing me deeper into the mattress. The past I thought I escaped was back. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't silence it. The next morning, Daniel kissed my forehead before leaving for work. I smiled automatically, but as soon as the door closed, I unlocked my phone again. Ethan's message glowed on the screen, waiting. "Are you okay?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Should I answer? Should I ignore it? Would replying mean betrayal, or was the betrayal in my silence all along? I told myself I wouldn't reply. That I had built a life now, that I had made a choice. But hours later I found myself typing back. "Why now?" The message sent before I could stop myself. My phone buzzed almost instantly. "Because I never stopped thinking about you." And just like that, the walls of the life I built with Daniel began to crack. I buried the past. Until it texted me again after 4 years of silence. The days that followed felt like I was living 2 lives at once. In one life I was Sarah. The wife, the homemaker, the woman who kept a clean house, cooked dinner and smiled at her husband when he asked how her day was. In the other, I was a shadow of myself, staring at my phone, waiting for another message from Ethan, fighting the storm that had erupted inside me the second his name lit up my screen. Daniel didn't notice at first. Or maybe he did, but he didn't want to push. He's the kind of man who believes that silence is a form of respect. He gave me space, mistaking my distance for tiredness, maybe even stress. Every night he kissed me goodnight, tucked the blanket around me and whispered, "Sleep well, love." His tenderness only deepened the ache in my chest. I tried to bury the messages. I told myself Ethan's return meant nothing. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart skipped in a way it hadn't in years. Our conversations were short at first, polite, cautious. "How have you been? Are you still in Chicago? Do you ever think about us?" Little by little, his words slipped through the cracks in the life I had built, and I let them in. I told myself it was harmless, just 2 people catching up after years apart. But the truth is, it wasn't harmless at all. I was falling back into a rhythm I thought I had lost. His words stirred something in me that Daniel's steady love couldn't reach. And I hated myself for it. At work, my friend Emily noticed the change before anyone else. She pulled me aside one afternoon, her brow furrowed. "You look different," she said gently. "Not in a bad way, but you're somewhere else. Like your body's here, but your mind is far away." I forced a laugh, brushing it off. "I'm just tired. You know how it is." But Emily didn't buy it. She looked at me with the kind of concern only a true friend can hold. "Sarah, are you happy?" she asked softly. The question lodged itself in my throat. I wanted to say yes, to nod and smile and reassure her. But the words wouldn't come. All I managed was a shaky, "Of course. I have everything I need." She didn't push, but before walking away she whispered, "Sometimes having everything doesn't mean you have what you want." That night, her words echoed in my head as I sat at the dinner table with Daniel. He told me about his day at work, a new project he was excited about. I nodded, smiled, played the part. But inside I felt like I was drowning. His kindness felt heavier than ever, like a gift I didn't deserve. Later, as I washed the dishes, Daniel came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You've been quiet lately," he said softly, resting his chin on my shoulder. I stiffened, forcing another smile. "I'm fine. Just tired." But he didn't let go right away. He held me tighter, as if he could feel the distance growing between us. "I love you, Sarah," he whispered. My throat tightened. I whispered it back, "I love you too." The words tasted bitter, like a lie I couldn't stop telling. That night I broke down. I couldn't hold it anymore. I lay awake in bed, tears slipping silently down my cheeks while Daniel slept beside me. The weight of the lies, the secrets, the double life. It was suffocating. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling my heart race, wondering how much longer I could keep pretending. And then the twist I wasn't ready for happened. Daniel stirred beside me. His eyes opened slightly and he turned toward me in the dark. His voice was quiet but steady. "Who were you texting last night?" My whole body froze. I turned to him, my face pale, my lips trembling. "What do you mean?" "I woke up," he said, his eyes searching mine. "You were on your phone. Smiling. You don't smile at me like that anymore." The silence between us stretched, thick and heavy. My heart pounded so hard I thought he could hear it. I opened my mouth, searching for words, but nothing came. He didn't press further. He just rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling, his chest rising and falling slowly. The hurt in his silence was louder than any argument could ever be. I turned away, curling into myself, tears soaking the pillow. The walls of my life were closing in. Pretending wasn't saving me anymore. It was destroying us both. The next morning, Emily's words echoed louder than ever. "Sometimes having everything doesn't mean you have what you want." And I knew deep down that my pretending was over. She said I looked like someone carrying a love that wasn't mine. That's when I stopped pretending. The morning after Daniel's quiet question, the silence between us became unbearable. He kissed my forehead before leaving for work, but I felt the hesitation in his touch, the heaviness in his gaze. For years silence had been my shield, pretending, smiling, going through the motions. But now silence was a blade cutting deeper with every passing hour. All day I moved like a ghost through the house. I folded laundry, wiped counters, answered emails, but nothing felt real. My hands shook every time my phone lit up. Ethan's name flashed again and again, messages I couldn't bring myself to open. My heart was torn between two men, but more than that, it was torn between truth and lies. That evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. He set his keys down on the counter, glanced at me, and then quietly walked into the living room. He didn't ask about dinner, didn't ask about my day. He just sat down on the couch, his shoulders heavy, his eyes fixed on the floor. I stood there for a moment, clutching a dish towel in my hands, my chest tightening. I knew this was it. The moment I could no longer run from. My legs felt weak as I walked into the room and sat down across from him. The silence stretched between us like a wall. Finally, I whispered, "Daniel, we need to talk." He looked up at me, his eyes tired, his face unreadable. "I know," he said quietly. I took a deep breath, my hands twisting in my lap. "I've been lying to you," I confessed. My voice cracked and tears blurred my vision. "Not in the way you might think. I haven't been with anyone else, but my heart isn't here. It hasn't been for a long time." Daniel didn't speak. He just sat there, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on me. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to continue. "Before you there was someone else. Someone I never really let go of. When he left, I thought I could bury the pain by moving on. I thought marrying you would help me forget. But it didn't. I carried him into our marriage and I never told you. And now he's back." The words hung heavy in the air. My chest heaved with sobs, but I didn't stop. "I don't love you the way you deserve, Daniel. You give me everything, kindness, stability, care, and I give you half a heart. That's not fair. You deserve better." For a long moment Daniel said nothing. His face remained calm, but his eyes glistened. Finally he whispered, "I already knew." The words hit me harder than any scream could have. My breath caught and I shook my head. "You knew?" He nodded slowly, his voice breaking. "I've felt it for years. The way you look at me, like you're somewhere else. I told myself it didn't matter, that if I loved you enough, it would be enough for both of us. But deep down I always knew." Tears poured down my face. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. He leaned back against the couch, closing his eyes. "I don't hate you, Sarah. I could never hate you. But I can't keep living like this either. We both deserve more than silence and half-truths." The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. My hands shook as I reached for his, but he didn't move. He just let me hold his hand loosely, as though he was already letting go. "I'll leave," I said finally, my voice trembling. "I'll pack my things tonight." Daniel opened his eyes, looking at me with a softness that broke me completely. "Take your time," he said. "I don't want you to feel rushed. I just want you to be honest. That's all I ever wanted." We sat in silence, both of us broken, both of us knowing this was the end. There were no screaming matches, no angry accusations. Just two people facing the quiet truth they had avoided for too long. As I stood and walked toward the bedroom, my vision blurred with tears. I pulled my suitcase from the closet, the same one I had almost grabbed weeks earlier. This time it wasn't just a thought. It was real. When I walked back through the living room, suitcase in hand, Daniel was still sitting on the couch. He didn't look at me. He just whispered, almost too softly to hear. "Thank you, for not lying one last time." I froze, the weight of his words crushing me. My chest ached as I gripped the suitcase handle tighter. And then, without another word, I walked out the door. I left. And as I closed the door, he said, "Thank you for not lying one last time." The first night alone was the hardest. I sat in my new apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and silence so heavy it pressed against my chest. No hum of the dishwasher. No steady rhythm of Daniel's breathing beside me. Just me and the echo of everything I had broken. I thought I would feel free, but at first all I felt was grief. Grief for Daniel, who loved me more than I ever deserved. Grief for the years I wasted pretending. Grief for the version of myself who once believed that following the rules would lead to happiness. But as the days turned into weeks, the grief slowly softened. I started walking every morning, letting the crisp air fill my lungs. I journaled late at night, pouring my feelings onto paper instead of hiding them behind smiles. I even picked up my old hobby, painting, something I hadn't touched since before Ethan, before Daniel, before I lost myself. There were moments of guilt that came like waves. Sometimes I'd imagine Daniel sitting in our old house, staring at the empty space I left behind. Sometimes I'd wonder if he had someone to talk to, if he was eating, if he was sleeping. And sometimes I'd ache for the life we could have had, if only my heart had been whole. But in those quiet, painful moments, I also began to understand something. Leaving wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about choosing to finally stop lying, to Daniel and to myself. One afternoon, as I was sorting through a box of books, I found something I hadn't expected. Tucked between the pages of an old novel was a letter. My breath caught when I recognized Daniel's handwriting. The letter was short, written in his careful, steady script. "Sarah, if you ever find this, I want you to know I never regretted loving you. Even when it hurt, even when I knew your heart wasn't fully mine, I was grateful for every moment. Please don't blame yourself forever. I just want you to be happy. Daniel." Tears streamed down my face as I held the paper against my chest. Even in the end, even in his heartbreak, Daniel's love was gentle. He wanted my happiness more than his own. That night, I sat by the window of my new apartment, the city lights glowing in the distance. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped. I didn't feel like an actress on a stage. I felt like Sarah again, flawed, broken, healing, but real. I whispered to myself, "I just want to be happy." And for the first time I believed I might be. Maybe happiness isn't about perfect marriages or picture-perfect lives. Maybe it's about honesty. About facing the parts of ourselves we've tried so hard to hide. About choosing peace even if it comes with loneliness. And maybe, just maybe, happiness starts the moment we stop pretending. So if you've ever felt like me, if you've ever sat in silence wondering why the life that looks so perfect feels so empty, you're not alone. Tell me your story in the comments. Because somewhere out there, someone is waiting to hear the truth in your voice, just like you've been waiting to hear mine. If you've ever felt like me, you're not alone. Tell me your story in the comments.